And I'm not going to bore you with loads of timelines, but what I'm trying to do is to set out the journey, because these things are journeys that we undertake with a lot of countries. 140 are on this journey, and as we also discussed in the previous session, people are trying to come up with answers to that question, so we need to understand that question. And while we might not, and I guess that was the previous panel showing Article XX and others, and you remember Philip Baker saying maybe there's different answers being provided, but the important part in some senses, and this is what this journey is trying to do, we're all on this journey, so directionally, while we're searching the consensus solution, shouldn't be using the word consensus, but the agreed solution, the implemented solution that is simple, it is important to see a bit where it comes from, because sometimes that also helps us to tell us where we might go. And so I go back to 2015 in the BEPS Action 1 report. I'm not going to go through the details, but like just 3 messages I think that they come out here. One is, you can't ring-fence the digital economy. That's an interesting observation, right? It's an interesting observation also, is this still true? Now, loads of people would argue that is still true. If you are a large business and you're not digital, you're probably not in business. And that was always also the question when you try to ring fence, where do you stop it? If you sort of conceptually, let's say, let's tax the digital economy, it's a good talking point, but when you're trying to make it work, when you try to put the plumbing in place, like who is a digital company? And who will be a digital company in 5 years? And what if you do a treaty and you ratify it, and by the time you ratified it, there's a whole host of other business models that have evolved that you haven't captured. Are you perpetually, we would love this, coming to Paris to renegotiate perpetually the treaty because business models are overtaking the laws? So that's the first thing to remember. Can you, and if so, how, ring-fence the digital economy and say, like, these people are very different? The second, I think, is that we said, because this was BEPS Action 1, right? The question was not the allocation of taxing, right? It was base erosion and profit shifting. And when we looked at it, we said companies in the digital sector, broadly understood, and aspects of digitalization in every businesses can exacerbate BEPS implications. And that's also because it's perhaps easier to do tax planning.
If Pillar 1 is not happening, is an ICU, whatever Mr. Rao said, it's because of its own reasons. The fact that something is happening at 2 forums of UN is not a reason, why Pillar 1 may not be happening. Let's talk about UN Tax Committee. You have Article 12A, 12B, which I already introduced, in the last model. 12B specifically deals with automated digital services. We have changes to Article 12, royalties, which is dealing with software royalty. A bigger issue has been resolved. And now we have Article XS coming in, which deals with taxation of services. And Article 12A and 14 will be subsumed in this. Now, all this works as such, do not directly conflict with Pillar 1. Pillar 1, has its own standing, if at all it stands. To bring these articles into tax cities, you need a mechanism which has to be MLA kind of a document. So UN has worked on it, which is a fast-track instrument. So till the time that comes in, it does not have any impact. It's theoretical to that extent. The countries can at best bilaterally try to adopt these provisions, but beyond that, there's nothing. So that's not at all disturbing the Pillar 1 work. What's happening at ad hoc committees work, which is multilateral framework document, which is happening. Now again, that's a very ambitious project which has been undertaken. The last which we saw is that on November 27th, there was a second committee meeting which happened, and 125 countries said yes, 9 said no, and 46 said abstain. So, but what it's going to do is that it's going to work over a period of next 3 years to come up with a solution. Whereas Pillar 1, if it comes, it can come this week, next week, whenever, in a very short period of time, if it happens. So I don't see any conflict as such between UN work and Pillar work. They are parallel works, and there's a big timing difference between the two.
If Amount A happens, I suppose, I think the first thing that you have to do if amount A happens is really to read through that 200 over pages of MLC. I'm very certain that more than 90% of the audience here have not had an opportunity to read the MLC. But yes, if amount A happens, the first thing you should do is really to read that MLC, which is 200 over pages. Well, then you can understand the intricacies that went into negotiating the MLC, right? And if amount A does not happen, it is really my desire that any solution to the taxation of the digital economy will build on existing achievements. And I think I also want to share that for the tax community at large, for transfer pricing practitioners especially, I think it is business as usual for everyone. Proper transfer pricing documentations is still important to support the transfer pricing policies, so as to minimize transfer pricing disputes with tax authorities. So congratulations, everyone. Our work still remains. We still have job to do. And I think for the businesses, I think again, it is the catchphrase for the conference as well. I think you can expect increased compliance costs because of the growing complexity of the global tax system. And of course, I think it is really important to remain tuned in to all the international developments. And for tax authorities, I think we will continue to have a very huge focus on transfer pricing disputes. Well, I think over the years, over my 10 years in this function, competent authority function, I do see that, there has been an increase in the number of transfer pricing disputes. In fact, I think it's about 3 times of increase. Well, but I must assure you that my team did not increase 3 times. I have to work with the limited resources that I have to deal with the 3 times increase in the workload. Yeah, but having said that, I think it is very important as tax authorities that, we do not discourage enterprise and innovation. It is really our collective interest to have a stable international tax system that really serves as a foundation for economic growth and shared prosperity.
And in several situations, in B2C relations, the gross basis withholding tax is kind of ineffective. Then, of course, there's a net taxation mechanism that has been built into this proposal. But the way the net taxation mechanism has been built up is, what country, and what the proposal essentially says is that, well, what countries, we have a net taxation mechanism, you go figure it out yourself of how that net taxation mechanism is actually going to work. So, for example, there is, to understand how to determine the PBT, how to just calculate the profit before tax of the selling enterprise or the M&E group to which the selling enterprise actually belongs. There is no guidance in the commentary, or the guidance is quite limited. But then when I make a comparison with the amount A proposal, and this is where I resonate with Achim's comments where he said there are 200 pages for each and everything in the amount of A proposal. Why? Because that's a globally kind of agreed solution, and they wanted to have a uniformly harmonized tax base. So that's why a lot of guidance had to be provided on, how do you just actually determine the profits which need to be allocated to the market countries.
I can confirm that Singapore has been actively engaged in the discussions, and out of those 200 pages, I can imagine that a certain amount are just because of Singapore's views on the need to relieve double taxation or multiple taxation. So that was, in my view, the strongest contribution made from one side.
From an outside view, the principle, I think, is accepted that there should be a way to tax in the form of Pillar 1. So the easiest way to get an answer to this after having gone through this for over 7 years is to find a model which has amount A and amount B. I think the format is acceptable to India, and I think India has been a strong proponent of this entire model ever since it emerged. And I think it's credible that we've reached the stage in the overall proceedings where we've reached a reasonable consensus on the format which can work. There are certain elements to it which are not entirely working in the way that maybe India wanted. So when I look at it, I think on amount A, there is reasonable acceptability to say that there should be sharing of taxing rights, super profits should be allocated, and I think the 20 billion versus 10 billion and getting to a better consensus over a period of time on the quantum. I think that's a fair way. So on amount A, I see less debate. And on amount B, of course, we in India have a perspective driven by local comparables, driven by local cost of capital, driven by local country risk factors, that may be a very fixed safe harbor in terms of a particular percentage of margin may not be entirely appropriate if it is across various jurisdictions. You have to look at local country nuances. I think that is where the factor comes in to say that is the cost as well as the asset value, is that a fair basis for determining this, or should there be further adjustments?
I think there are a few things that need to still be thought about. What was the original problem? The original problem was digitalized companies or companies in the digital space. And what we see now is that with the exclusionary sort of thresholds being set, there are some companies that may be out of the system. And so we have a dual system, one which applies to the top companies, and then the rest which applies to all other companies.